Certainly, certainly. So welcome to our first museum talk of the fall 2020 semester today. Today we're really pleased to welcome Caitlin Donnelly. She's a museum specialist at the Birmingham Museum, and she's also worked at the Minnesota Children's Museum. She holds her BA from Calvin College, and she's an alumni of Wayne State's Anthropology Department, where she received her MA in 2014. Today she's going to speak to us about her title of her talk is Open When We're Closed, and it's about what the Birmingham Museum is doing to stay involved with community during the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's all give a big welcome to Caitlin. Yay!
Well, thank you very much, Kim, for the introduction. And yeah, this is my title page, Open When We're Closed. The Birmingham Museum, we'll get to it in a little bit, but we have been closed to the public since March 14th. But we're all still here at the museum, and we've been working on ways to engage our audience even when they can't come into the museum. And so I just want to stress from the starting point that this is not a blueprint that I think all museums should follow during pandemics or times like this. This is what we did, what seemed right to us, and lessons that we have learned throughout the process. So I'd encourage people to take whatever sticks out to them, take whatever seems right for them from this, or, disregard it completely if your museum is in a different spot than we are. We're a small local history museum located in Birmingham, Michigan, not in Alabama or in the UK. We do get confused for them a lot online, and we have 3 members of staff right now. So just going in, that is, I guess, the caveat to all of this. But so this is my title page, and Kim said a lot about me, but there's a couple things that you should also know about me. And one of those things is I absolutely love frauds. So the upper corner here is a picture of me at the Runestone Museum in Alexandria, Minnesota. People think that the Vikings went to Minnesota, got all the way there, and then carved on a stone about how mean the natives were to them. So they were going to take their ball and go home. Seems unlikely, but there's a whole museum dedicated to it. And all their labels are written in papyrus fonts, which if you've ever taken a writing labeling class, you're cringing right now at the thought. So, but yeah, so I love frauds. I also love 1890s memes. So this selfie that I have down here is me with Beat Parrot. He is a huge mascot for our social media campaigns. We found him in a scrapbook from the 1890s, a woman who was just cutting out illustrations that she really, really enjoyed and putting them in her scrapbook with occasional mentions of her children, like report cards and whatever, but mostly it was like these weird vegetable illustrations. And so this is a beet that has a parrot's head and like weird little human-like fingers. I love him. If I were to get another tattoo, I would definitely get Beat Parrot as a tattoo. I also really love recognition. I'm one of those people. So this is me and Mari Manugian. She's our state representative for the district. And we actually connected with her over social media, and she got us a recognition from the governor last year with a special shout out to the stupid jokes that we tell on Twitter. So that was really cool. And also another representative called me a local treasure on Twitter. So I also have that all over my LinkedIn and on my resume because, if I were to be a Greek mythological hero, I would be Odysseus, and not for the reasons that you're thinking. Sometimes I am the cleverest person in the room, but most of the time I'm a giant ding dong that just wants recognition and might get everyone around me killed, and also just really likes presents. So I don't think the Myers-Briggs test is where it's at. I think in order to get a true measure of person, you need to find out which Greco-Roman mythological hero they are. And that is all I'm going to say about that. So let's talk a little bit about where I work, Birmingham Museum. like I said, we're a small local historical museum dedicated to preserving the history of Birmingham and also a little bit of Bloomfield and the surrounding area. So you can see our mission statement, pretty bog standard for a museum like we are. And I will say Bloomfield kind of doesn't like it. What you'll find in the field is small historical museums and societies. Sometimes they get real territorial over the people or the stories that they feel are theirs. So we had an exhibit a couple of years ago where we talked about a man who did go to school in Birmingham. He was a test pilot for Henry Ford. So we talked about him in our exhibit. And they got really upset. Members of a certain historical society who will remain nameless, but I did kind of name them in my last sentence. They came in really upset that we claimed him, even though he technically lived in their neck of the woods. And I'm like, yeah, you can fight me for him. That's fine. They didn't take me up on my offer, so I didn't fight anyone that day. Very disappointing. But the Birmingham Museum, we have two buildings. One is a house built in 1926 by the family of what would become the first mayor of Birmingham, the Allen family. So we call it the Allen House. And that is where a couple of our permanent exhibits and also changing exhibits are. And also upstairs is our offices where I am right now. The other house is the Hunter House. And that was built in 1822. It's the oldest house in Birmingham, the oldest house in Oakland County, and among the oldest houses in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. Probably, those lists are hard to compile, but probably top 7 oldest houses. And we use it, it's set up like a house in 1822 with furnishings of the time period. And we talk about the people that lived in the house. So one of the so-called founders of Birmingham lived in that house, John West Hunter. That's why it's called the Hunter House. No relation to Hunter House hamburgers, which is very disappointing to the second grade school tour kids who come through and their teachers are like, we're going to the Hunter House. And they're like, woo, milkshakes. And then we show them a butter churn, and it's a little disappointing, I have to say. So we have that house, and the house was occupied up until 1969. So we have 140 years of stories that we tell about the families that lived in that house. And the house has been moved twice in Birmingham. So a lot of fun, interesting stories there. And then between them, we have the Hill School bell, which was, the Hill School was one of the first through 12th grade schools in the city of Birmingham, and that was the bell that was on top. It lived in our lobby for a little bit. The lobby is a small room. We would ring it. Everyone in the building would go deaf. So now we moved it outside to annoy our neighbors with. And so, like I talked about, the Allen House is where we have our changing exhibits. We have one exhibit a year. And this year, our exhibit was Beyond Suffrage, Empowering Birmingham's Women. One of the many anniversaries this year that is kind of being pushed to the back burner is the 100-year anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which in theory gave women the right to vote. As we know, there were many groups of women that were excluded from that at that time, but that 1920 is a good jumping off point to talk about that. So what we wanted to do was talk about Birmingham women who lived before the 19th Amendment, what their lives looked like, the women who were actively campaigning for the 19th Amendment, and how they went about doing that, what led them to the belief that they should have the vote. And then what did the lives of women look like after they had the vote? In what ways did they kind of grasp political power and run with it or not? So we explore that. So that's what that picture is. That's part of our exhibit where we're talking about women during wartime, World War I and World War II. And on the other side of the screen, you'll see one of our former interns, Amy Wells, leading a group of second graders through a tour of the Hunter House. So again, it's set up like an 1822 house. And when we're doing our school tours, we like to talk about how people lived back in the very, very early days of settlement in Oakland County. And of course, settlement by people of European descent. Native Americans were here long before, but you know, we don't call them pioneers for many reasons. So yeah, that's that. And so when I was hired here in 2016 in January, I was hired in mostly because of my past experience doing educational programming for school-age kids, K through 12. That's what I was doing when I lived in Minnesota. And I actually got the job because another Wayne State alum who I went through the program with, she was actually on the board of the Birmingham Museum. And she messaged me one day, she's like, hey, I know Minnesota's a hellscape and you wanna leave and come back to Michigan. And there's a job opening up. I think you should apply. So I did, and I got it, and I'm very grateful to this day because Minnesota is a hellscape. Fight me about it. I don't care. But so I was hired for my expertise in doing school programs. And so when I came in, a lot of what we were doing was we were just walking kids through our current exhibit and just telling them about it. And one of my biggest pet peeves in writing is, and this is in writing, this is in doing any sort of audiovisual work as well, is when you're telling people instead of showing them. And so I feel like sometimes we get into this rut when we're doing museum education is we want to tell people everything that they should know or we think they should know instead of showing them. So I wrote programming kind of in capsules. And so this is one of them. And this is an activity we call packing the trunk. And so we're talking about, you know, some of the earliest families who came to what is now Birmingham. They moved here from New York. And they moved here before there were moving trucks, before there were airplanes, before, you know, suitcases, really. So how would we have packed things, what we would have brought with us, what are some of the things that, you know, they would want to bring with them nowadays if they moved. And so this was actually a program that I wrote for the Carver County Historical Society. So pro tip, keep a copy of every single program you write because a lot of times you can reuse them. So I did. I just had to change a couple details and a couple dates. But we actually bring out artifacts from our collection, and you'll see them on the table behind me. And a lot of those are things that we can touch. So I can pass them around, and the students can touch it. They can smell it if they like. I don't know. You give second graders an old medicine bottle, and immediately they want to smell it, which I can't blame them. I would probably do the same thing. I was a weird kid. And so the parents and the teachers can get involved in that too. Because if any of you are parents and have been on field trips, I'm sure you've also been bored sometimes. So, you know, it's something fun. Everyone likes touching things in museums. That's one of the reasons why I work in a museum is I wanted to touch old things without being yelled at for it. And so I just figure everyone else also wants to do that. So that involved a little bit of going into our collections and deciding, you know, what things are more durable, what things can we afford to let possibly get damaged and all that. So there were staff discussions about that. And again, like I never thought I would be doing social media when I went into the museum field. But my boss kind of pushed me into it. She's like, I think you might be good at it. And we just need someone to handle our Facebook page. All we had at the time was a Facebook page that had been established in 2012, but it was whoever had time went in and looked at it and updated it and answered messages. And a lot of times when you have a small staff, no one has time. So I was assigned to it as the new kid. I was really scared at first, but kind of jumped in and kind of had the opportunity to get a little creative with it. And it took off. We got so many new followers. A lot of people were really looking forward to our content. So we decided, okay, now that we've got a handle on that, we can go bigger. So let's try Instagram. So early 2017, we got on Instagram. That went really, really well. So we're like, okay, let's add more things to our plate, because that's always a great idea, right? And so then in September of 2017, actually our 3-year anniversary was yesterday, we got a Twitter account. And then we recently added our YouTube channel to that as well. So all three of them kind of have very different personalities, because our audience across all three are very, very different. And so it's a fun challenge to try to keep up with all of them. And it's been really rewarding. And now we're kind of known for being that small museum with really an outsized internet presence. And in fact, a couple of our friends on Twitter, we connect mostly a lot with like local politicians and journalists on Twitter. It's a great place to hobnob with people who might potentially help you out later on with free publicity and stuff. And some of our local politicians in our area, you know, they report that, you know, they're in Lansing, whatever, passing bills, doing whatever they do. And, you know, their colleagues will be like, oh, yeah, no, you got the district with the funny museum. Yeah, that's cool. And so, you know, that's really gratifying. Recognition is always nice, even when you don't have a personality like mine that kind of relies on it. And since we are a department of the city, we are municipally funded, municipally run. There are good sides and downsides to that when it comes to doing this sort of work. The good side is there's standards and stuff already in place. You don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to rules about, you know, how do we talk to guests on social media? What sort of standards do we have in place about language and stuff like that? The downside is everything that we do has to be archivable, which means we can't do Snapchat because things disappear in 24 hours. For the same reason, we can't do IGTV or Facebook stories. So there's, you know, we do have a little bit of freedom in that we didn't have to sit down and come up with standards and best practices on our own. There's some handicaps there too. So it's not as freewheeling as we sometimes like to portray it, but it's not bad. And so that leads us to, oh yeah, and here's some examples of, you know, kind of our different personalities across all platforms. Twitter, we do dumb jokes. We like to do song parodies sometimes. Instagram, people love old black and white photos, so we've been doing a lot of before and afters. And a colleague of mine recently took that over, and she's been killing it in that department. And Facebook, we kind of do a lot of like on this day in Birmingham history, because we do have some people who really like the nostalgia of things that they remember from the Birmingham of their childhood, but we don't want to dissolve into just a nostalgia Facebook account, because there are plenty of those, and I'm not a nostalgic person to begin with, because it's 2020 and everyone that I've ever looked up to or admired has turned out to be trash. So your heroes are all dead. So that does, I'm not a nostalgic person, so I would not be good to run that, but we can indulge in a little bit of that nostalgia while also doing history too. So talking about Barnum School, which no longer exists, but also, you know, asking for stories of when people went to Barnum, but also talking about why Barnum was built in the first place, why the school district was expanding so much when it was built. And so it's been really, really great in that regard to do that. And so March 16th, this was our standard boilerplate language that went across our website and all our social media, was that we were closed. Originally, we did have an end date that we thought we could open by, and that has come and gone. So thankfully, the city that I work for did keep all of us employees employed, both to take care of, the property behind me that belongs to the residents of Birmingham, that we need to make sure is dry and stored safely and properly, and also to help out at Birmingham's COVID-19 hotline, help out at the clerk's office with the elections coming up and all that. So we were really fortunate in that regard. None of us were furloughed, none of us were laid off. And then we had a new thing where we were like, okay, well, we had an exhibit that just opened. And how do we get what we're doing, what we have, out to everyone else, out to the people who they can't come in right now? And that was kind of one of the main things we were doing. You're like, yeah, we had a lot of people that were watching us online, but we were really counting on people being able to come into the museum. And everything that we're doing online was supplementing that. But now our digital presence is the main show. And how are we going to rise to that occasion? And so we decided, we had recently started doing video series. We had one called What Were They Thinking?, where we taste tested historic foods, and then, kind of talked about like why people loved figgy pudding in the 1890s. And that went really, really well. So we're like, okay, well, let's expand that. And I got over ambitious again. And I was like, let's do 3 videos a week. And what we decided on was 3 main categories that people on our social media feeds had already really, really seemed to enjoy, and things that we wanted to see. Like if we were to, go to like a museum's YouTube channel or Facebook page, like what sort of videos would we want to see? And we had 3 main categories, and one was behind the scenes content. So what does it look like up at our office? Like, what are we doing when people are in the museum? Another one was tours. So tours of our new exhibit. We had our school tour program that was canceled. How were we going to do anything to help out the teachers and parents in our district with digital schooling or homeschooling? And our third one was Facebook Lives. We had never done Facebook Lives before. Well, I lied. We had done one video to kind of test it out 2 years before, and we had never gone back to it. So we're like, all right, let's try this again. And so I got, let's see. Cool. Can you all see my YouTube that I just pulled up? No?
Nope.
Let me see if I can do it. Let's stop it, and then we're going to restart it. How's that?
Yes.
All right, cool. So this is our tours page. This is our tours playlist. So as you can see, we did do our Behind the Suffrage gallery tour. And I try to keep all of our videos under 20 minutes because that is the length that I like, because I do not have a long attention span. And I figure that is great because there's tons of other people out there without great attention spans. And if people want longer videos, they can watch several of our videos back to back. So we did do a behind the scenes gallery tour. We had the city therapy dog because yes, Birmingham is that bougie. We have a therapy dog. And she was very, very bored with City Hall being closed to the public. She didn't have any new visitors and things to visit with. So we invited her to the museum to do her own gallery tour. So we have a gallery tour, which is just museum staff talking about things. And then we have just Bella wandering around the museum. And honestly, Bella's video has so many more views, and I'm not even mad. She's cute. And along with tours, we did our 2nd grade school tour program focusing on the Hunter House and what it was like to live in Birmingham in the 1820s and 1830s. So we broke it up by different rooms in the house just to make it more digestible content. And we also invited Bella back for those as well. So Bella is in these videos as well. She loves her field trips, and honestly, we love dogs, so it works. And so as far as behind the scenes content, let me open this up again. These are our unboxing videos. And I got this inspiration from a friend of mine who saw on Twitter that every once in a while, when I had time, I would open up a random box in my office and I'd live tweet what was inside. And that's how we found Beat Parrot, actually. And she's like, well, okay, but since you don't have people in the museum now, will you have time to open up more boxes? And I was like, this is a really good idea. So I identified 17 main storage spaces between the two historic houses that we have here. And I decided to, each week I'd go into one, I'd pick up a random box, and we'd see what was inside. It was not scripted at all. Sometimes I knew it was inside the box, like these shoes in episode 1. I remembered when they came in. I got the store name wrong, but I was able to talk about those. Other times it was just like, I don't know what this is, but this is cool. And someone in our comment section on Facebook would be like, oh yeah, that's such and such. And I'd be like, awesome, thank you so much. And so that was a great way to not only just bring in a little bit of spontaneity and kind of have a little bit of fun with our collection. And I think that's something that, I mean, looking at my background, there's so many boxes behind me. Like, don't you just want to open one and see what's inside? Like, we all want to do this. So it's a great way to let everyone in the audience kind of have that experience without physically letting them into the museum and letting them open up boxes, which is not museum best practices. And another thing that we did for our behind the scenes work, maybe I don't have it up, but I also had my colleague Donna Casaselli actually just go in and walk everyone through the accession process. So what do we collect? Why do we collect it? How do we enter it into past perfect? Why does everything have a weird number attached to it, like 2004 26-4? What the heck does that mean? And then also like how we choose the materials that we choose to wrap it up and store it in. And so this was about a 40-minute process altogether. I broke it up into 2 videos, and you know, Donna was like, no one's gonna want to watch this. This is so boring. You know, like, I like doing this, but who else is gonna like it? And that was one of our most popular videos for like 2 months straight, because it was just, people are interested in what you do behind the scenes, even if you're not necessarily sold on that. And our last one was our Facebook Lives, which we're still doing. And so every Thursday at 1 p.m., we kind of chose that time because it looked like a lot of museums were going live on like Wednesdays and stuff in the beginning. So we chose Thursdays, and we chose 1 p.m. And we talk about everything from the earliest history of Woodward Avenue, which, you know, was a Native American trail that we have evidence of people using for 10,000 years, all the way up until we're talking about Cream Magazine in Birmingham. And, you know, we're talking, you know, Civil War stories, or what the education system of Birmingham looks like. Why is the school district shaped funny? Like, why is it going in a Southfield and gobbling up parts of Bloomfield and Bingham Farms and other communities? So we're talking about that as well. So just kind of anything you want, we talk about. We had a mystery. A lot of times what we've been doing more recently is talking about mysteries that we have in our archives. So one of our more popular lives was Village Players, 100 Years of Goats. Because we had the Village Players were a theater group that still operate in Birmingham. And we had in their archival folder 2 pictures of goats with absolutely no explanation as to why they're there. And I was like, okay, were they sacrificing these goats? Like, why do these goats exist? So we were kind of talking about that. Another one that I really enjoyed doing is we talked about the Birmingham connection to the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. So that's been perennially popular too, because we do have a connection to the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, and you're going to have to watch the video to find out. And so, yeah, these have been so popular, even though people are going back to work, to school. Some of them are trying to go back to normal. People are still tuning into our lives, or they're making a point to come back and watch them afterwards. And I try to keep our lives, again, 20 minutes or under, just because that seems to be a good cutoff point. Sometimes we go up to 25, but at that point, I literally shut off the camera. I'm like, we are not going any longer than this, because I'm starting to lose the plot. So I have the shortest attention span of all the staff here. So so it has worked for us in that regard. So to go back to that, so there's a couple things that we did, and I think we did pretty well. And one of those was bringing Bella, the city's therapy dog, into the process. She's cute. I think people got sick of seeing our faces and hearing our voices after a while. And so having a cute dog to look at was great. And Birmingham's a fairly small city. So if you had gone into, say, the clerk's office or the treasury department or up to the planning office, chances are you ran across Bella on the way. And so a lot of people were wondering, like, what was up with Bella? Was she doing okay during all of this? And so we kind of got to grab some new audience that we hadn't had before. And we really expanded our audience a great deal during this time. And that was really, really great. One of the things that kind of fell flat, and I'm kind of disappointed by that, is our latest series of videos. We called them Birmingham Shocking True Tales. And they were just like short 5-minute videos about a strange occurrence that had happened in Birmingham. So like a missing man that turns up again. Where was he during all this time? Or true crime, or, you know, just something short and kind of interesting from the past. And I think because it didn't really fit too well into our 3 categories that we identified that people were really looking for during this time when it came to content, I think that's part of the reason why people didn't really connect with them or really respond well to them. But I got some great screenshots from those, so I'm gonna use them. But once that's our season of that is over, I think I'm gonna let it rest for a little bit. And another thing that we kind of fell short of during this time was each of these videos takes up to 12 hours to edit, to caption, and all that. So our written outreach materials kind of took a back seat. So there was research that I would normally do for a Facebook post, for a Twitter thread, for a newspaper article that didn't get done at that time. And so I think looking back, that is something that perhaps if I had to redo it, I might not have been so ambitious, because, you know, the research that I was doing was pretty important too. And that sort of written communication outreach was something that I think not everyone likes watching videos. Some people would prefer to read a caption on Facebook or Instagram rather than watch a video. So those were kind of 2 areas that, as of right now, I can see that maybe didn't work so well, or maybe we had an opportunity there that we didn't fully reach the potential that was there. And of course, this is still early days. We're still kind of in a weird not quite a stay-at-home order, but not everything is back to normal yet. So maybe in 6 months, I'm going to have other areas where I'm like, oh, that was another missed opportunity, or wow, we were ahead of the curve there. That worked so well. But overall, I think our experience, and I think what we accomplished was pretty good. Even though right now engagement is kind of leveling off because people are going back to work, people are going back to school, those fears about too much social media use are starting to creep back in. And so people aren't on Facebook 24/7 anymore. We really, we're still keeping those followers, but we're not having as much engagement. Which I see as a good thing. I'm choosing to interpret it that way. We're kind of going back to what I think of as like pre-pandemic levels of engagement. So still pretty good, but not crazy like we were in, say, April or May. And another thing I didn't mention towards the beginning, we did make a conscious effort to not do pandemic related material. We decided not to share information about the pandemic any more than we absolutely had to as a department of the city of Birmingham. We decided not to do comparisons between now and the 1918 influenza outbreak, which I know other institutions were doing. And we decided not to do what I call positivity porn, where it was just showing, the fantastic, sidewalk art that people are doing, or the inspirational signage. And the reason why we decided to do it, and this is absolutely no shade on institutions that decided to go in those directions, a lot of that was just because people are being bombarded by that material, and we didn't want to be another voice in that tsunami of sort of like doom and gloom, but also stay positive. We wanted to be kind of a respite from that. And that's something that, again, that was a choice we made individually for our institution, and it worked for us. Had we been another institution in another area, maybe it wouldn't have. So, that's just something that we did, and that's what we found success with, and that's why we made that choice in the beginning. And so moving forward, again, I mentioned engagement is kind of going back to pre-pandemic levels. I'm choosing to interpret that as a good thing. Our lives continue to be popular. And so we're going to continue them until we open up to the public again. And who knows when that's going to be. The city of Birmingham has been very conservative, looking at the numbers and everything. So we're not too sure if we will be open again to the public even this year. In the month of September, we do have our pop-up exhibit every Friday from 1 to 4 p.m. And this is in conjunction with the National Archives, who sent up a Rightfully Hers pop-up exhibit about the 19th Amendment. And we've supplemented that with material from our current exhibit. And we've chosen to focus on female politicians in Birmingham. And again, how women used the power of the vote immediately right afterwards the 19th Amendment passed. How did that change their lives, their job prospects, what they did for the community? And we do have upcoming genealogy and oral history videos, and a potential collaboration with the Birmingham School District on digital content about suffrage for older students, perhaps middle schoolers or high schoolers. And September 26th is our annual cemetery tour. So if you love cemetery tours, there's information on our website and everything about that. Come out, it'll be a great time. Social distancing and masks will be enforced, all that good stuff. And so that is kind of that. So please follow us on social media. Please help my need for constant attention by following us. Thank you. And I guess, if there's any questions or comments or things you want to get mad at me for, now is the time.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you guys have been making these decisions about social media or whether or not to do like pandemic pop-up stuff, is that a staff decision, or do you guys have to talk to the city about it, or do you guys have a board? Like, how are you say we're making those decisions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So far it has been a staff decision. The city has been involved in that in some respects, just in we want to coordinate our efforts. So we did share some things on our Facebook page and on our Twitter about, what the city was doing, or the COVID-19 hotline that the city had for residents. We did share a little bit about that, but we kind of very early on told the city, like, this is the direction we're going in. We will support the direction that you're going in and getting the information out, but we're not going to be reposting 24/7, because generally we don't anyways. We might do, some things with, maybe the city's having an open house, and I'm like, hey, jump on this, get on those fire engines, it's going to be fun. But we normally don't repost or share everything the city shares anyways. So, and our board has been generally, they're not too involved in our day-to-day operations, and they're very, the word is escaping me right now, but they've been very supportive of our day-to-day decision-making, and but we keep an open line of communication with them. So if there is something that they want us to do, we can go ahead and do that. One of the things that we do have, a couple of videos that we did make, was members of our Friends of the Museum board. They were like, oh, well, what if we don't end up having our cemetery tour? So they shot just quick little videos on their cell phones of them doing their presentation at Greenwood Cemetery. And so what I did is I just took them in, I edited them real quick. I threw in some spooky music and I captioned them and I put them up. And so people have been responding really well to those as well. So, because again, I think it's something where they're not looking at my face for the 900th time that month. So that's one of the limitations of having a small staff is, everyone has to be in front of the camera at all times, basically. And sometimes people get sick of it, and that's all right. That's valid.
Sometimes it just thinking about how things have changed in the last couple of months. Have you been following the Cowboy Museum?
Yeah. Oh man.
Security guard, and how they made him like the new face, and oh man, they've been amazing at that. I was totally impressed. Like, it wouldn't work where I'm at and things like
right.
that.
Yeah. It was a calculated risk that I think really, really worked super well for them. And I mean, you see accounts like that, like the Merle too blew up in a similar way a couple of years back. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool. It's interesting to see how some organizations have adapted, and there's some that maybe didn't, for a variety of reasons. And I think in the next couple of years, it's going to be really interesting to see if there's like any scientific studies about, what worked, what didn't, what conditions did you need to have in order to survive? Because unfortunately, there's a lot of museums that look like they're not going to make it out of this.
Yep, that's a scary thing to see happening, but it's definitely, or they're transforming in different ways because of it. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's some museums that might just be online for the rest of their existence, and who knows what that's going to look like too, because the landscape of social media and online communication changes so rapidly. So we were very lucky. We had kind of just invested in some technology that allowed us to shoot these videos, that allowed us to do everything that we did online. And so we weren't caught as flat-footed as we might have been had this happened even 6 months previous. So
it is interesting to think about, though, like you mentioned, the fact that you guys ended up doing so many videos. Maybe you would have just ended up doing some sort of like more Facebook posts with photos, but it like your in-depth research, and people still would have loved it. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really interesting to think, yeah, what would have happened, and maybe. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about.
My cat has decided to appear.
Oh, your cat has a question.
Question is, when is dinner? Are you guys still going to do your programs with the second grade remotely now that you normally do?
Yeah, so those are in the spring.
Okay.
So we still have a couple months to see how that's gonna go. I hope so. Just speaking selfishly for myself, I'm kind of, not only do I need recognition and attention, I'm kind of also an emotional vampire. So doing videos is, I can't feed off of anyone else's energy. So like I can when, you have a giant group of second graders in the room. So
yeah. I don't know if anybody else has questions. I don't want to just turn this into me chatting with you the whole time, but because I could.
No, that's all right. Can you show us your cat like in The Lion King? Can you? Oh, yeah.
He was recently highlighted on our social media for the department when they started doing Furry Friday. So he is now Twitter famous.
As all cats should be.
It's true what you were saying about the social media thing. We've struggled with it, and it's kind of ended up getting divided up by who tends to be more comfortable and already on different types of social media for getting things done. Because when we've tried it otherwise, it just kind of hangs out there and doesn't get updated. So that seems to be what works best for us, is to just find, but again, small staff, part-time staff. So,
oh yeah. Yeah, what I didn't mention is that we're all part-time too. So I just got a bit of a promotion to 32 hours a week, but throughout all of this, I was only working 20 hours a week. So yeah, it's difficult when you have a small staff that's only there part-time, and you have to divide things up and really make those judgment calls as to what is more important. What can we put off for another week? What do we put on the back burner for a couple months? And of course, that's constantly changing when you're working in a museum. Things come up and you have to drop everything and work on something. Or I have projects I've been working on for 3 years. So, and who knows when they'll be finished. So
some of them never. So
that's true. Some of them go to, the next generation of staff. I inherited a couple of those. When I first got here, we had just gotten the majority of our Cream collection donated. And Cream magazine was a rock and roll magazine, second only to Rolling Stone in subscriptions from 1969 and 1986. And so we had just gotten a huge batch of memorabilia, magazines, and like personal notes and things by the journalists who were working for it. And so for about a year and a half, that was my entire job, was reading Cream magazines, putting together the exhibit, accessioning all those things. And that was something just that previous staff didn't have time. So, when the new person got in, that was what I did. And it was great. I've read almost every single Cream magazine in the entire run, including in the 90s when they revived it briefly. And it was mostly pictures, so I didn't really have to read that much.
That's awesome. Have you given any presentations on that besides the actual exhibit that you put up? Because
Yeah, we did a couple lives on it. Yeah. I have worked it into a couple other presentations that I have worked on just in like Birmingham in the past. But yeah, as of right now, not too much, but definitely should because I really enjoy it.
There's people out there who are just really interested. Like I know we've had some Twitter conversations where people are like, "Hey, magazines from Detroit," and like Birmingham, it's all over in Birmingham, and like,
yes,
hey, go check out the museum. So there are people out there who have strong ties to that magazine for sure.
Yeah, and we were lucky enough. One of the videos I'm currently working on is in 2014 we had the Cream staffers that were still around and wanted to talk to us. We did an oral history with them. And so it's like a 2-hour long conversation, and I'm still kind of putting it together, and hopefully it'll go online soon, because it's fascinating, just the stories that these people are telling about what Birmingham was like in the 70s when they got here, and you know what was it like working with Lester Bangs and all of that. So hopefully fingers crossed I'll finish it soon, and
really cool
people can enjoy it.
That'll be really interesting, and I'm sure there will be people who will be excited to be able to watch that as fresh content from home.
And we have done a live about Cream Magazine too, so it's in our playlist on YouTube, so you can go watch it and enjoy.
Very cool. Kim, Hannah, any questions?
Not to put y'all on a hot seat.
Kim, you're muted.
I said, no, I'm fortunate that I can always, when something does come up, I can always reach out to Caitlin to get an answer.
Yeah, that's true. You know where I'm at.
Did you volunteer in the Gross Cut Museum when you were here, Katie, at Wayne State?
I don't think I did.
You did?
Oh, Kim is nodding her head. I don't know. I played rugby. I have a lot of concussions. There's many things that I've done and I don't remember.
Yes, she did.
Okay.
She actually spent quite a bit of time in the lab helping us with sessioning. I think you worked on Past Perfect.
Oh, yeah. I did do a little bit of Past Perfect work with y'all, so.
Okay. Got it.
Which was invaluable when I started here. And they're like, take all this cream material and put it in Past Perfect. I was like, I can do that.
Got it.
Not well, but I can do it. Because, again, short attention span. I'm like, I want to go do something else.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Yeah, we're working on trying to get more. How much of your museum do you think you have actually in your Past Perfect system? Because we have like such a tiny % right now, and that's what we're working on. But
yeah, you know,
editing process.
It's in stages. Because before 2009, well, we only became a museum in 2001.
Okay.
And they had a full-time staff. Before that was Historical Society, who was actively collecting things, but everything they were doing was paper records. Once we began as a museum, people were trying to incorporate those paper records into Past Perfect. And some of those paper records were very scant, and some were very verbose. And then they were also taking in new things as well. 2009, during the Great Recession, the city of Birmingham cut all museum staff. And for a while, it was run by volunteers who were doing a very good job, doing the best that they could, but they weren't trained in it. And so you can kind of tell when something was done by a volunteer who was, you know, working with what they had and doing a great job, but maybe not putting the finesse on it that someone who's trained in Past Perfect would have. And then my boss was hired on as director, and then we've been rebuilding from there. So you can kind of tell their stages, but oh gosh, I would say things that have been digitized were less than 10%. Because some things we do have Past Perfect records for, but it's a letter, and all we have is letter written to so-and-so by so-and-so. There's no picture of it, there's no PDF of it, no one has transcribed it. So we have a lot of records, but some of them don't say much.
I think a lot of ours are like that too, but even still, most of our stuff is still paper because since we started in the 50s, I mean,
Yeah.
And Arnold and Gordy just collected so much, and we're working on so many projects that there's a lot. And one of the things that I'm often thinking about is we have a lot of artifacts that get individually cataloged, as opposed to like, oh, we have 50 nails, we'll give them one catalog number. And then we have 50 entries now, and for things that do not need to necessarily be individual, which again,
Right.
you might think about it differently if you're not dealing with a digital database. But
exactly, yeah.
now that we're trying to transform that stuff to digital, those can be
and then being a repository as well.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of things coming in from a lot of different sources.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, we recently did a project last summer where my colleague Donna and 2 of our interns just went over to the Hunter House and just did the kitchen and looked at every single object. Is it in past perfect? What records do we have? Do we have clear provenance? Are these things even of the time period? Because sometimes, you know, people put something somewhere and they're like, this looks historic. Well, it's a mason jar from 1933. It does not belong in a house from the middle of the 1800s. We need to take those out. So it took like 4 months and we got through one room. So yeah, the struggle is real. It absolutely is.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing for volunteers to realize. Stuff is just how slow to do a thorough process, to do it thoroughly.
And administrators also to realize, like, you know, I think that's important, right? Yeah. So like when you tell them, you know, it's going to take longer, they realize that, you know, they have to be realistic about the time frame.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's like, we gave you 6 months. Why don't you have all of it done? We don't understand. And it's just
right. Well, I donated that yesterday. Why isn't it on display today? That sort of thing. Yeah, we have a lot of our interns coming from Oakland University and their communication department. Actually, we got on their list of good internships, and we're not complaining. And so many of those students have only toured like the public areas of a museum. So bringing them on board, I'm like, even if you never set foot in another museum again, even if you never work in another nonprofit, like you can go into a job interview process and they're like, well, can you do such and such a system? And you're like, listen, I don't know that system, but I've done Past Perfect. And let me tell you about Past Perfect. If I can do Past Perfect, I can do anything.
Yes, it is a exhaustive and extensive system.
Yes.
That's cool. Awesome. Kim, did you want to wrap it up maybe?
Oh yeah.
We don't want to take up any more of your time because we've ran over our 4 o'clock.
That's all right.
But I really appreciate you coming and speaking with us today. And hopefully we can keep an open line of communication.
Definitely, yeah.
Museums going forward so that, you know, we can all share knowledge. And if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out.
Oh yeah, and same over here. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. And it was great to kind of digitally be back at
Thanks for being the like inauguratorial Zoom lecture person.
Yes.
I have set the bar.
And for anybody that's here, I'd like to invite you to hear Kelsey Cross. She's going to give us a talk on museum education and the American Northwest. She's on the Western Coast in Washington, and about what to expect in a museum career. She's worked at several different museums. She's worked she was the education coordinator currently at the LeMay Museum, which is America's Car Museum. But she's also worked previously at the Seattle Children's Museum and the Museum of Flight in Seattle since she completed her MA from Wayne State in 2013. So we're really looking forward to hearing from her that'll be our October talk, which will take place on October 16th at 3 p.m. That's a Friday. So please make plans to join us if you see this video later.
Yes, and Kelsey is amazing.
Yeah.
So